Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Robert Costa. CBS News political contributor Ashley Etienne joins us now to discuss our conversation with Congressman James Clyburn, the Assistant House Democratic leader. Ashley, you have so much experience in Democratic politics. You've worked at the highest levels of the House of Representatives. You've worked for Vice President Kamala Harris. You heard from Congressman Clyburn a lot of support for President Biden when it comes to this document story. Is that your sense of where the Democratic Party is right now as they react to this still unfolding story?
No, I think Mr. Clyburn was right. There's a lot of frustration about how the entire story rolled out. It was somewhat of a disaster, in fact, from a communications perspective. But, you know, here's the point, and he made a really good point. It's all about intent. That's what it comes down to. And so let's compare the facts. You have President Trump, who took hundreds of documents from the White House, obstructed DOJ's efforts to try to retrieve those documents. You know, the FBI had to, forcefully come and take those documents, compared to President Biden, who discovered the documents, handed them over, and is cooperating with DOJ. I mean, so what the GOP is trying to do is provide this, make this false equivalence here that doesn't really exist. But what I really noticed about it, having worked on the House side and the Oversight Committee, what I would sort of caution Chairman Comer about is it feels like he's going down the same path that Republicans typically do, the path that Issa took, Dan Burton took, and even Ken Starr took.
Committee oversight chairmen in the House,
and even Ken Starr took, right? Which is he's going down what's a fishing expedition, right? He's trying to sort of draw this link between the Penn-Biden Center and communist China, which is quite ridiculous. In fact, what I think my advice to him would be is just to really focus on what every scandal boils down to, which is the cover-up. Right? If the timeline is true, that was, first sort of broken by CBS News, if the timeline is true, it's a problem for President Biden. They should really ask the question really simply, who knew what when, and who made the order to DOJ not to make it public that these documents had come in? I mean, they sat on the documents for months until CBS, broke the news. So to me, that's the cleaner narrative. Trying to go on this fishing expedition and this witch hunt to draw some link between Biden and China is ridiculous, when the reality is the timeline is problematic enough. If they ask for the documents, the White House says no, then you've got a clean narrative. They're hiding something, they've got something to hide. And that's really enough when it comes down to these types of investigations.
What about Congressman Clyburn's comments about President Biden and the 2024 race? He said he is convinced, yes, I am, he said, he is convinced that Biden runs in 2024. Are you and other Democrats as convinced as Clyburn?
Listen, I'm not just convinced, I'm excited about it. I think the president, as I've said before, is by far the most consequential president in recent history in terms of his accomplishments, in terms of bipartisan accomplishments on everything from the Inflation Reduction Act to the CHIPS Act. I mean, it's really profound and incredible what he's been able to accomplish. So I really hope the president does decide to run. I think the party itself is confident that he will. Nobody wants to see this, the party mired in a primary fight. Like, it could be incredibly messy and really take us off track and off course and erase all the good work that he's already done. So I think everyone's excited about it, anticipating that he will run again, of course.
Clyburn warned any Democrat about mounting a primary challenge. Last night, I was covering Senator Bernie Sanders give a big speech about the state of the working class. He is making no move to run against President Biden. In fact, he's worked closely with President Biden. A Sanders ally, Congressman Ro Khanna of California, who was co-chair of Bernie's campaign in 2020, he's not making a move to primary Biden. He says Biden should not face any challenge. Do you sense, though, because of the document story or President Biden's age or any other issue, that there is going to be a primary challenge?
No, I think the document story is much ado about nothing, especially when it comes to Biden. Trump, I think there's a clear case of intent, and DOJ is going to aggressively pursue that. But I think the document story doesn't play a big factor in whether or not people decide to run against.
What about the issue of generational change? Could that prompt somebody maybe lesser known to jump into the race, or you just don't see it at this point?
I don't see it at this point. I don't see why anyone would. I mean, what's your argument against President Biden? If you're challenging him, on what grounds would you challenge him? that on his age. I mean, that I've worked for, you know, this, I've worked for an 82-year-old before, and they're, you know, and I've worked for the president as well, and they're incredibly sharp and on top of it. And like, what would your argument be to run against him?
What are you hearing about the announcement timeline? The State of the Union coming up in early February, sometime soon after that, or could he wait months?
Well, you know, the White House is super tight-lipped. They're very insular.
That's why I was asking you.
You know, I got friends over there, but, you know, you always, once you leave, you always question those friendships and how deep they actually are.
I'll leave that alone.
But nevertheless, no, I anticipate that it'll be soon after, because you guys will start to wear him out on the questions, right? Whether or not he's going to run. And, you know, you don't want too much of a swirl. You want to get ahead of that, right? And you want to control the story as much as you possibly can. So I anticipate it'll be soon after the State of the Union. And the State of the Union provides him an incredible opportunity to really lay out again for the American people what he's done over the past 2 years that has really, you know, not only brought our country back from the brink, but also improved their lives.
Going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much to Ashley Etienne, top Democratic strategist, for joining us.